Thank you, Richard. Right, I have asked a question and I will do my best to answer it in the next 20 minutes. But, spoiler alert, there's probably going to be more about humans than AI, so if anyone is going to be pre-disappointed, you can leave now, but we will get to the AI. So, term extraction. I think it's important that we start by getting a level ground so we all know what we are talking about. There are fundamentally two methods in the classic term extraction, which Angelica has presented many times, and so I won't go into lots of details. Of course, we can use a tool as the term extractor in memoQ or anything else. There's nothing novel there. Generate a list of candidates. A translator or terminologist then spends a lot of time trawling through that list. Alternatively, or rather, these extractions are mostly based on frequency, so how frequent the terms appear will be what qualifies it as a candidate in most cases. The other method, of course, is reading through the whole corpus, and then you do sort of extract as you go kind of thing, which is favored by many. And the main point here is that both methods are quite labor-intensive. In labor-intensive, meaning time. Time is money when you have to pay a translator, terminologist to do this kind of stuff, which is, of course, why some people thought using AI would be an interesting suggestion. Angelica said a couple of years ago that you could probably do a corpus of 20,000 words in about 2 days using the manual extraction. So that's just so you have this kind of ballpark figure, and you can see that that is, while we are looking at it. So, what are the general rules for term extraction? I'm not going to spend the next 2 hours going through all that, because there are many, but just refer to this study by Melby from 2012, which summarizes most of at least what is the general consensus of this kind of thing. There is a link to it in the end, so you can download it. But in general terms, we can just say that it should be things that are domain or company specific. It's mostly nouns and phrases. You should avoid common words. Consider the frequency, so just because a word is frequent, it doesn't mean it necessarily should be there. That we have the stop words and all that kind of stuff. So, that's what we're talking about. But the main point here, and this is where it all starts, when we have rules, we have interpretations. Because anyone who's watched any courtroom drama knows, of course, the law says something, but someone always gets off on a technicality, because the rule says so, but how do we actually interpret that rule? So we set up an experiment to see if the AI can do whatever. So we took a corpus, about 1,000 UI strings, good 5,000 words, so that should take about half a day for a human to do the term extraction in the manual way, reading through and so on. Then we ask a couple of AIs to do the same thing. Then we compare the results and draw some conclusions. Easy. So, first we had the human to go through it, as an example of the term list. So they're using the read through and extract method. And we had a translator doing this as part of a normal job. New client submitted all this. We needed to translate it into a number of languages, so it's a good idea to get someone to actually build the glossary first, extracting all the frequent terms. I then had a look at the list after that had been extracted, and some of the choices that they made me wonder. You think, really? Including this term? And not that? This is kind of weird. So we created a second glossary, so we had one for reference. And then things start to spin out of control. We must have more humans. This is the word list generated by one of these many online tools. Just counts the frequency, so you can see the kind of words that we're dealing with. So we have the two humans, and then, as I said, the main point here is we suddenly saw how inexact a science term extraction really is. As I said, it's about interpretation. So one of the translators extracted 73 terms from this corpus, the other one 17. You think if it was fairly close, then fair enough, there will be some things, but this is miles apart. So only 9 terms were in common. And this is really, as I said, when this is mad. How are we gonna, get anywhere with this kind of thing? Which one of the two is the best, the most correct, the most useful? You can have any criteria you want, but the point is that how do we know? How do we know what really happened? So throw more translators at it is always a good solution. So surely that must solve the problem. Not really. Here we have just a very brief summary in the yellow line, as you will see here. That's the number of terms extracted by each of the 5 human translators. So the first 2, we had the 73 and 17 terms. Third one did 69, so at least that's closer to the first one with the 73. Then we have someone in the middle with 39, and then one with a massive 112. Okay. In total, they extracted 310 terms, different terms. Terms in total, and 195 were actually different. So, what criteria should we then use if we're trying to establish a baseline here? Because ultimately we want to get to the AI, so we want to compare, how good is it? We need something to compare it to. And of course, just like with MT, the human is the golden standard, or is supposed to be at least. So we chose the lowest common denominator, literally, but saying, well, if 2 of the humans have selected a term, then we include it in our baseline. Any term that's selected by only one can be seen as this just a random, a preferential choice. Maybe they weren't thinking. But if 2 or more selected it, then there's probably a chance that it should be included. But at least we can see consensus is a very rare thing. Picked by 2 or more, that was 69 terms out of the 195 different ones. So only 22% of all the selected terms were chosen by 2 people. That's incredibly low, in my opinion. So actually throwing more at it didn't really help in establishing this. And as we can see, the more, if we see how many were picked by 3 or more people, 32 or 16%, and it keeps dropping. Only 3 terms out of the 195 were picked by all of them. Consensus? Not really. Or it will be the world's smallest glossary at least. We then calculated what I call here strike rate, which is a measure of the efficiency, because this is when we get to talk about the AI, we are talking ultimately about, how well can it do it? Can it save us time and money and so on? So it needs to be reasonably efficient. If it's not efficient, then what's the point? So in this case, and that's the top line there, the strike rate or efficiency, where we are trying to see, well, how many did they, each of the translators pick, in this case, that were in the set of commonly picked terms, so 2 or more people having picked them, divided by all the ones they picked. I mean, how many did they actually pick in order to get the numbers that were in common? And we can see that, there were varying degrees of efficiency, but it's not too bad. Only number 5, the one with the highest number, picked, 112 picked, but only about half of them were in the set of things. So, they were reasonably efficient. But then we had the success rate, or we can call it accuracy, so i.e. how many of the ones they picked were actually on the list in the common set. And here, again, we can see the 5th person, unsurprisingly having picked a lot of terms, then unsurprisingly a lot of them are in the common set, where, of course, human number 2, who picked only 17 terms, well, there's not much to do since the common set is reasonably large, so that the number of success is relatively low, if you will. And we had the number of selected. So, I love humans, so I decided to torture them a bit more, and saying I wasn't totally impressed with the first round of things, the inconsistencies, the lack of consensus. So let's do it again. What if instead of picking from the whole corpus, as you did and you would normally do, if we now take the list of the ones that you have all picked once at least, so the 311 terms that you picked between you, if we treat that as a candidate list, and then let's see if we can get more consensus if you actually pick from that. So, this time, picked by 2 or more have now gone from 22% to a massive 95%. So now we actually are getting closer to something that resembles a meaningful consensus. And as you can see, the number in each category has gone up. That's the numbers from the first round. You see, picked by all 5, it was 1.5%, 3 terms. Now it's up to 12%. So a significant increase. Still not a very big glossary, but never mind. We can at least see that where we're heading with all this. So we can see basically more terms are picked by everyone. I had a diagram there to see that you can, if you remember vaguely the number, how many did they pick. Now this time when they suddenly see this, and of course they know this is slightly cheating because it's they know that the list they're now picking from is created by other humans. It is some of their colleagues have actually picked this, so they might consider them a bit more carefully rather than if it had been a statistically derived set. So let's go to the AI. Now we know how good or how bad the humans are. How do the AI do? We selected 4 AIs. We have our own ChatGPT based that we had then prompted, 2 from a system called terminologist, Claude, and ChatGPT. The reason we have them in with a couple of times for the first round here is that we tried different prompting systems, as we will see here in a minute. So we created prompts based on the article I referenced before, because it's the same guidelines that were used by the human translators, so it seemed fair. And then, we prompted them slightly differently, mostly the same, but slightly differently depending on what it was. For instance, we asked them to extract a specific number of terms. As you can see here, we have number 2 and 3, we have the term XT asked to extract 150 terms or 80 terms. As it is, if you look at the percentages, in terms of the efficiency, doesn't change, 9%. But in terms of success rate, well, clearly the more it extracts, the more successful it actually is. But if we look at, again, the number of the total terms extracted, it is slightly higher than the first round of the humans. We have them here. So we can see here. This is where it gets kind of interesting. We were looking at the consensus. The first round, we have, I thought, pretty bad consensus, but the AIs, if anything, you can say, well, actually, they behave like humans. They are totally not agreeing with each other about anything. Now, this might surprise some, but not others, because again, why should one AI system behave like another AI system? There's no particular reason why it should. But I think at least some of us thought, well, surely they're machines. They should be similar. They're not. They're actually more disagreeable with each other. If you look at picked by 3 or more, only 4% compared to the 16% by the humans in the first round. Again, if we look at their strike rate, so their efficiency, I mean, the Claude prompt 1 in the middle, 1%. So that's massively inefficient. It picked a lot of terms, but actually only one of them was in the human baseline. So not a huge and resounding success. And again, if we compare it to what the second round of humans did, we can see they actually performed even worse. Anyway, AI moves along, as Jay was just saying, you know, in a year is a long time in AI. So we thought, well, I wonder if, you know, they have improved or somehow does things differently. So Lana, who's here with me and can answer any technical questions afterwards, then chose some different AIs. We have the Google one, another Claude, 2 different Claudes, which is generally considered to be the best for many specific tasks, a Llama 3, and the new GPT-4 to try and do the same thing. Now, between them, they extracted 802 terms, so a huge amount of terms, but percentage-wise, 26, actually close to what we had with the first set of humans at 22. And if we look, I think we have a comparison. No, sorry, that was the old one. So this is the new one. So we can see that they are in the same ballpark. They picked fewer terms, I should say, this time around, but 19% of them, you know, were in common. So they're not actually hugely, significantly different in terms of what they achieved, despite being newer and presumably better. So let's move on to the actual comparison. Sorry about all the numbers, but you know, this is the name of the game. So what we have here, we have over to the left, we have the 2 baselines. So the baseline created by the first human extraction, and the baseline created by the second human extraction. And then we see how the different humans and how the different AIs actually performed. In the first one, it's the actual number of terms that were extracted and therefore were in common. And then we have more meaningfully the percentages below. So first, we have the efficiency. But here we can see that in terms of efficiency, our second set of AIs were actually very efficient at 50%, which is more than any of the humans. So in that sense, they extract fewer terms in order to get something that is a bit meaningful. So in terms of time, money, and so on, that's quite interesting. In terms of success, well, depending on you know, again, who we are comparing to, but again, these ones, they are actually, despite their low numbers, they are relatively successful in extracting terms that we would like to use. But of course, when you compare to the second set of humans, well, the same humans, but their second attempt with the generated list, where they obviously got everything right, then they are still somewhat behind. I say best and worst in inverted commas because this is just, again, based on these statistical data. So saying, again, the efficiency, the best humans, they had, and we're talking individual humans now, not as a group. So of the individual humans, the best ones were 77% efficient in the first round and 99% in the second. So one of the people extracted 99% of all the common data. That's impressive, and there we can see that actually, again, the worst human in the first round, 50%, not impressive, but in the second round, 93%. So once they've been sort of guided, then they get quite close. And we can see then the best AI is lagging somewhat behind, and the worst AI is really lagging very much behind. If we look at the success rate, so i.e. how many terms were actually found meaningfully, the best human in the first round got 81% of them, and the second time round, our super linguist picked all of the ones in the set that everybody could agree on, plus a few extra that they didn't agree on. The interesting thing, though, is if we look at the worst human here and the best AI, they are comparable on both metrics. So I'm not I am kind of suggesting that maybe the worst human and the best AI, you could probably sack the human and employ an AI instead. But not the worst AI. The point is, of course, how do you know which one is the best AI? I know who the best translator is or was, but with the other one not. So, any conclusions? We can say that the humans are more consistent when they are picking from the list. That's where we got consensus. When they were just picking from the corpus, as you would normally do, and not from a human-generated list, then we can actually have a huge degree of consensus. We also saw that there's very little consensus in interpreting which terms should be extracted. Again, lowest common denominator, 2 out of 5 needs to agree, and in the first round when they picked from the corpus, only about 22% was actually common. So in this sense, I mean, you can have very good guidelines, and we wrote them all out. They're in the appendix, and so on. People's application of these rules leaves a lot to be desired. We can then say that AI is worse at finding common terms, but not worse than some individual humans. Has a good strike rate and success rate in some cases. But it still leaves, of course, the real question in the end. Quality versus quantity, because this is all about quantity, because that's the only thing I can measure using this kind of statistics. Which words and phrases were left out or included? You can only know that if you actually, like I did the first time when I got the first set of data, sat and read through and said, they have included something here. To give you an example, we had something called pen 1, pen 2, pen 3. I thought, really? I mean, you can argue whether pen 1 should be included in the first place, but pen 2 and 3, in my opinion, and I think anyone who's done this kind of terminology extraction would say, no way. I mean, that's just a variation on the above. But then how do I know, especially the known, unknown, and so on? So what about the ones that are not included? If I get a list and saying these are the ones that I extracted, even an extensive list of extracted terms, how do I know that there's not something critical that has been left out? And that, I think, there's no way of knowing. Unless, of course, someone can train another AI to look for these terms and compare and so on, but that would be an experiment for next year, I think. The extraction guidelines are here along with a link, so when we upload the presentation PDF after the conference, you can download it and you can take the link and you can scrutinize all the data for yourself. Thank you.